Now, Tristan, you wrote an article for the New York Times back in December 2019 called Our Brains Are No Match for Our Technology. And you quoted Harvard professor Edward O. Wilson, who said, "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." Wow. Now, 3 years later, we're even further down that path. And I think it's the perfect segue to talk about what everybody seems to be talking about today, which is the metaverse. And I thought, perhaps the best way to start is through the lens of the work that you're doing, what you're seeing and where you sit. What does the metaverse mean to you?
That's a good question. In a way, technology companies for a long time with the attention economy, thank you, by the way, for having me on. And it's great to be with both of you. And that was a really generous introduction. There's so much that's happened over the last few years. It's interesting to hear it recapped. And with saying that, a lot of my work started with a study of the attention economy, which is that there is a finite supply of human attention out there. And that will create, whether we like it or not, a zero-sum competition for who's going to get that attention. Is it going to be Netflix? Is it going to be YouTube? Is it going to be Twitter? Is it going to be TikTok? Is it going to be your family? Is it going to be your dog? Is it going to be your sister? And that's where the initial work came from. And specifically the business model of major, market cap north of $500 billion technology companies being based on that race for attention means that you have some fairly powerful actors. I mean, if your sister wants your attention through text messaging, she's competing with a $500 billion behemoth who has supercomputers pointed at your brain to try to harvest that attention. So now when you go to the question of the metaverse that you asked me, where my mind goes when you ask me that question is that technology companies have been in a race to create the metaverse for much longer than they've called it the metaverse, because the metaverse is really the race to virtualize our experiences and create an entire virtual world in which we feel that our identity, our avatar exists in that world, our virtual goods exist in that world, our attention, how we interact with other people exists in that world. And, so when I think about that, I think that in a way, this is nothing new. This was kind of the plan all along, which is Instagram was creating the Instagram verse, prior to there being a full VR environment. The power of a VR environment is that now, all of your senses are immersed, obviously, in being defined in that way, as opposed to just my identity, my social pressure, my social communications. And so if you think about the number of knobs that I have as a persuasive technologist. A lot of the foundation of our work is also based on my background at Stanford in this lab called the Persuasive Technology Lab. And in general, this discipline of persuasive technology, which is how do I get access to these lower level levers of the human mind so I can influence more aspects of your experience? Well, if I can influence your social communications, if I can influence your avatar, your identity, your self-image with beautification filters, if I can access, the dopamine sort of slot machine, pieces of your mind, those are more knobs that I have access to. And the more knobs I have access to, the more I can control your experience. Well, metaverse is just the increasing extension of even more of those knobs where I get higher bit rate, higher immersion, et cetera. But one of the things that's alarming about this is there's been problems with virtualizing our experiences and making us more divorced from the physical world and from our physical relationships for a long time. And in fact, a lot of people who saw The Social Dilemma and in general have young people that they know who are immersed in technology are really concerned about what's happening with young people. And The Social Dilemma profiled how high depressive symptoms for teenagers, specifically teenage girls, get kind of the worst of it, but it really affects all teenagers in different ways. That the mental health problems and also teen suicides go up like an elbow after about 2011. So this is really interesting. So you have depressive symptoms that are actually going down for a little while. You get teen suicides that are going down for a little while. I think it's, the early 2000s to 2009, 2010, 2011. But what happens in 2009, 2010, 2011 is you get this elbow curve and it starts going up. And the reason I'm pointing to this is what happened in 2010, 2011. We didn't get social media where we didn't have social media in 2010, 2011. We already had Instagram. We already had Facebook. We already had Twitter. What changed was the fact that it went mobile. This is really interesting, right? You get the combination of Instagram and being immersed in a mobile phone. So now with that, what I'm trying to get at there is that's kind of when the metaverse begins, because now instead of Instagram being something that I use on a desktop product, or Facebook, something I use on a desktop, in which it's not my 24/7 reality constructing infrastructure. But when suddenly social media becomes on the mobile phone, and I'm using it to check, it's my way of relating in the world. It's my way of accessing customers if I'm a small business. When it becomes the primary way that I define my reality, which it starts to do after 2011, that's when we see the mental health symptoms of kids show up. And I think that's a really important fact, which is that it's so easy to virtualize our experience in a way that causes this really, really significant consequence. That's bad. And I think that speaks to the power and the danger of virtualizing people's experiences, that if you don't get that right, because you have that much power of dominating people's experience, you can cause real harm.